Hello, everybody, and welcome to our special EFILE season webinar called Get EFILE Ready, the critical options to review now before the system opens. My name's Elizabeth Kohl, and I'm Director of Communications and User Experience for TaxCycle, and I'm going to guide you through this checklist of items that you can get ready and do right away. So today is really about giving you a checklist of things to double check, whether you're new to TaxCycle, whether it's your second year, or whether you've been around for a while. All of the things I'll show you today are things you should take a look at before you start filing returns. So I'm not going to go into huge detail on certain things like pricing. We have whole webinars that deal with setting up that system, but I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks and point you to the right place in TaxCycle so you can verify your options before the season opens. And we're going to look at where to put your EFILE accounts, what to do about authorizations, file naming, default folder structures, options for new files so you don't have to enter the same information over and over again for each client, a little bit teeny weeny bit about options profiles and what they do and what's changed this year. We're going to look quickly at templates and what you need to do to roll that template forward and how that's getting a little easier, print sets and pricing. So there's a lot to cover. It's going to be high level, but hopefully will help you get ready for the season. And I'm going to screen share shortly. And when I do, just note that all the information you see on screen is pretend. We don't use existing social insurance numbers. The contact information is fictional as well. So EFILE opens on the 23rd of February 2026. That's a Monday. You've got a little bit of time to get going. Hopefully, you've already done your EFILE renewal. And if you have, you want to go into TaxCycle options. And if you haven't done this already, you want to put that new password in TaxCycle options under EFILE accounts. If you do your renewal in the fall, you can put this in right away because the password works immediately. You'll notice there's a field under here for Rep ID. When you do your EFILE renewal, you are asked for a Rep ID and ID now. This is optional within the tax software, but it can be helpful if you include it as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is this year something has changed. If you've just switched to TaxCycle and this is your first year filing with TaxCycle, you need to give EFILE Help Desk a call. You need to set up TaxCycle to in your EFILE account to make sure that it is associated with your EFILE account so that you will be allowed to file returns from TaxCycle. So if you haven't done that yet and this is your first year with TaxCycle, get on the phone and get that sorted out before EFILE opens. And finally, I wanted to remind everybody that the CRA will never send you links asking you to activate your account and those kinds of things. Don't get scammed. Don't be really cautious about what you get in an email. There have been phishing scams out there looking for EFILE numbers and passwords. And that's part of the reason the CRA now has associated your EFILE account with particular filing software. And you can have more than one software on file or returns. You just need to give them a call and sort it out. The other area in here that is important to take a look at is the authorization section. Now, the authorization section was used for all the authorization forms that are come from the CRA. So in the past, that was your what we would call AuthRep Biz or your T1013, the ability to authorize an individual to access an individual's account or become their representative. Now, the CRA has moved that system to request authorization from an individual into represent a client. That's the only place you can do it. You cannot do it from TaxCycle anymore. So you need to go into represent a client, make that request, and then your client needs to go in and approve that request. You can't do it from within TaxCycle. You can still make authorization requests for businesses, though. So you do want to set up your information, your rep ID, your group ID, whatever makes sense for you. And of course, you can also still do the MR69 if you're in Quebec as well. And that's where this information goes here. Now, something I did want to show you is that if you've already got authorization from a client, TaxCycle remembers this. So if last year you went in and you did either you requested authorization back when it was possible, or you did AFR and you got a successful download, you can see that you will have that history of that authorization here on your engagement worksheet on the auth-rep section. So that TaxCycle keeps that history when you carry forward. Now, if you've got a new client this year and you've done the authorization through CRA, or if you have to do a new file and you already have authorization, or you can try your AFR right away. You don't have to fill this section out or whatever to indicate that you're authorized to TaxCycle. If you just click the link up here when it lets you know and you attempt AFR and you successfully get data back, then TaxCycle knows you're authorized and it'll complete this section for you. So it kind of keeps track of it for you. So that's a helpful thing to know. And in terms of changes, again, for this year, the other thing that is changing, and I'm not sure if you use this, there's been quite a discussion on our community about how people go about this, but the CRA is ending access to the notice of assessment within tax software. So previously there was something called Express Notice of Assessment, where you could download a client's notice of assessment into TaxCycle from the CRA. And now the CRA is only allowing access to that through Represent a Client, or obviously the client can get it themselves. So if you did use Express Notice of Assessment, now you have to change your process a little bit as well. All right, we're going to go back into options here for just a little minute, and we're going to deal now with file naming. And I think this is an important one to take a quick look at the beginning of the season, because file naming, if it's your first or second year, you can really get out of sync with what you want to be consistency-wise. So in TaxCycle, there's always options. There's sort of these general options at the top. And then there's also module options. And if you haven't discovered this yet, this is the great time to learn about it. And in module options, there's usually a set of options for every year. So one of those sets is for file naming. And with some of these options, you can set it on the parent and then have it apply to everything underneath, and others you can't. There's some reasons for this. Things like printing, you kind of have to do them separately. But in here, you can choose how you want to structure your file names. So whether you just want the taxpayer's name, social insurance number, the client reference number, whether you want to have the tax year as part of the file name, and whether you want to see the adjusted date. And at the bottom, we show you some samples of what it looks like as you change your option. So that's kind of handy. Now, the neat thing about this is if you make a decision that you want to change in 2025, you want to include your client's reference number in your file name, and I click apply, and then I open a file or have a file open like I do right now. Let's do that one more time. It's supposed to give me a review message, and it did earlier. Let's try it one more time. There it goes. It just took a little bit. So I'm going to close this for a second and come back here. It actually will send you this bulletin and suggest you could rename the file to match the new convention. So this is handy if you've already carried forward your files and they have a particular file naming structure, and you've just discovered this option because I showed it to you today, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to have to go back and rename all the files. Well, if they're carried forward and every time you open them, you'll get this review message that it doesn't match what was in options or suggesting rename it. And if you click that link, it will rename the file and get rid of the old one that was named incorrectly, and you'll be off to the races. So slowly your file structure will reflect your preferred naming convention. And I'm going to go okay on that. It's just going to take a minute. That's what I wanted to show you as well. So the neat thing about file naming, like I did that for 1 year, right? So the prior years are not set up the same way. What I can do is if I go in the sidebar here in options, and this is a little tip that a lot of people don't notice, if I right click many of the options and I can apply to other years. So this first one I can say, well, let's just apply it to 2024. And this one I can apply it to all years. So if I do that, then every year underneath there will be set the way I want it. I actually prefer to not set with social insurance number, so I'm going to just make sure I get that set up in my preferred way. So that's a tip here. If you're working with module options, look for that right click if you want to go back and make sure all the years are using the same thing. And then I hit apply, and it takes a minute. And then you can see my review message just appeared behind it. The other option I wanted to point out to you here, and first I'm going to create a side-by-side view. I'm going to put my 2025 file on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, I'm going to put my 2024 file. And both of these right now, I'm on the T4 slip, and I can tell you I have no idea which one is which. Well, I mean, I could if I had a bigger screen, and I'm using a smaller screen so it's easier for you to see. The menu bar at the top would tell me which year I'm dealing with. And it does actually on the slip as well. But to make this simpler, if you're needing to work on multiple years of returns for a client, we have a really handy option for that as well. So we go back into our module options. And this one's on the general page. So the page where you change your color scheming. And there's this little option at the bottom here. It says add the year as a background texture to prior year forms. And if I set that up and click apply, or OK if I want to close the dialog box. It's just taken a little bit to come into view, which is interesting. And maybe because I only set it in 1 year, that's what it is. Let's go all the way to the top. I'm going to sit on that and make sure every year has that applied. Apologies, that was my mistake. There you go. So now you can see on the right-hand side here, there's a little bit of a background on it that says it's 2024. So as I move between forms, it's really clear to me which one is current and which one is last year. So really handy to have in your toolkit there, if that will help you if you're working on multiple years or you're reviewing last year's return at the same time as you're getting going here. The other thing that I like to take a look at here before I start that relates to file naming is your client folders. So this is a general TaxCycle option. It's not a module option, and it's under the files and folders. And you want to make sure that your files are going to be saved where you expect them to be. And if you're going to make a change to that, now's a good time to do it. So if you've never dealt with file folders in TaxCycle, we use an automatic folder naming structure. So you can define where your files are and what folders they sit in based on a series of available variables underneath here. So I generally put them right on my C drive. I don't share these files with anyone else, so I don't need to use the full computer name. But if you were in the office and this was an options profile or something that you were going to share with others, you'll want to make sure you have that network path, the / server name / in here instead. And because I don't actually prepare returns for a living, I just throw everything from a particular year into a folder. So I've used this return year variable. But say if I wanted to do that and make sure that the files were separated into type based on the type of return I am doing, I could do return type from that list down here. Remember to use the little mustache breaks. And then you can see this sample it says to me here. It would be, okay, if I had a T1 return, it will be in 2025 T1. And then I could even go further if I want, and I can do a folder for each client, a client. So Philippa McDougall will have her own folder, or household name might be a little bit easier as well. And then it shows the whole family, which is kind of handy as well. And that means that, everything, you could put everything into that folder. Your TaxCycle file, you could put any source documents, you can really build your own structure. The other great thing about this is you can go and you can preview these folders as you build this structure. TaxCycle will automatically create them when you save a file, like once this is set up, or you could come in here and create a folder as well. And less useful for the individual clients, you're not going to do that, but let's take the household name off of that and see if I'm going to preview my folders. it says over here, I can create that folder if I need it. And I can create them all with these buttons at the top or share it through Windows. All right, one more thing. So if I go back to my default, which is this, and I want to preview those folders, you can see that I can go and find those folders if I would like and view the files that are within them in Windows Explorer. So once you have the folders created, it's smart enough to know, okay, now the folder's there, what are we going to do with it? And this is all the folders, like it's handling all the different modules as well. And then finally, if you're coming, and this is the checkbox, of course, that says to create new folders as required when saving a file, so that you want to make sure to have that checked, especially if you're going to use household name or regular name. And of course, we always get asked, well, is there a way to work around this? Is there another thing if I have my last year's files from my old tax software stored somewhere completely different, something like that? You can put exceptions at the bottoms, and the exceptions are by module and by year. And then you're going to put them, you're going to define where those will appear at the bottom. So just so you know. I like to review this, and then you want to go in and make sure that your client manager also has those folders set up to index as well. So that's always a good thing to take a look at. And now, this is all stuff I would do before carrying forward, but the world won't come to an end if you haven't done it, if you've already carried forward a file and you set these up, because TaxCycle generally will let you know that something is out of sync, or it will save it in the new location. So it's okay if you've already got your files carried forward. Now, one more thing before we get on to some of the other options I'd like to cover is I wanted to mention a little bit about options profiles. So this is coming up more this year because we made some changes to the way that options are stored. So if you're a solo preparer and you haven't really been sharing options with other people, you may not have really spent a lot of time learning about options profiles. But what they are is basically a zip file which contains everything that gets said in this dialog box. And those zip files are then shareable and movable, and you can use them to back things up. And the thing is that if you go to your options dialog box, I'm just going to save my options here so I can, at the top here, you will see a list of the options profiles that are available to you. If you've never created an options profile, all you're going to see is local up here. And I'm pointing this out right now because it can be a really great option for you to back up your options. You'll see that I have several versions here because sometimes I work in French, so I kind of like to have some test data that is for French clients so that it looks accurate when I do screen captures and things. So I can create multiple options profiles and have everything shift, which is kind of cool because you can change this on the start screen. But if you just have your local options, they are actually in the same structure now as those options profiles, and they weren't in the beginning. So if you've been with us for a while, it is possible that some of your settings like printer settings or template files are not within that local options profile or your logo and things. So this year we did a little bit of work to finally encourage you to move those. So back in 2020, or I think it was 2020 or 2019, we changed the way we were storing these files. And if you joined us since then, your files are probably in the right place. But there will be some people who might see messages like this at the top where it says, you know, your printer settings need to be moved into the local options, or we'd like you to move them there, and you have the option to move them. In general, this is just going to be a problem if you've been with us for a while. So please move them. And the reason why we would like to move them is that we're getting ready to allow you to share these options or store these options through an account in the cloud. And if they're not within the profile and they're just somewhere on your Windows operating system, that will not be possible. So please take a little bit of a moment to move them. If you're running into trouble or you're a little concerned, you can always give us a call. I'm going to go back to my webinar options so that I'm not going to save those so that my error doesn't go away, that my error goes away. All right, so the next one, and I'm just going to The next one I wanted to take a look at is new file options. This is also something that generally you do before you create a lot of files, but it's not the end of the world. So back in these module options, TaxCycle has new file options. And what these are the defaults for any file you create, whether you carry forward the file from last year or you create it brand new and blank. You can set a whole series of defaults of what you want in that file. This goes from whether you want to exclude certain types of slips like the T5008 that sometimes you get, there's tons of them coming from AFR and you really don't want all those individual slips when you carry forward. What you want to see on the summary and how you want to be alerted. The default city and province, that can be handy if most of your clients come from the same place, right? Optimizations, language of correspondence, default values for online mail and signing dates and things like that. So take a little look in here. And I don't want you to be concerned if you've already carried forward a file or you're already working on files. TaxCycle's really great because if you change the default that you have in here, just like with the file naming, it's going to let you know if you choose something other than the default. So if I choose the language of correspondence as French, it tells me in a review message, it doesn't match the specified default. So just make sure you set the language correspondence to English. Or, that kind of thing. Or you can sign off these messages. Sometimes you don't want the default, right? So it's okay if you mess with these in the middle of the season. It's not going to be the end of the world. You'll slowly get more standardized as time goes on. And I can just answer this too if I want it to be back to English and resolve the review message here. All right, so we're going to deal with templates. And really what I want to deal with is letterhead, right? Because you can add, that you can add your logo and image file signature in here, and that's really great. And for some reason, mine aren't in here. I need to go and get them. And I've got to find them. There's my signature. There we go. You can add them in here in options, and then they go automatically into our default templates. I will say that the one challenge I have found with the logo files is sometimes people have a very high resolution file. There's no options here to allow you to define the size of it right within this window. So I usually, whenever anybody runs into trouble with this, is I let them go straight into their template editor and edit what's called the letterhead template. So just to get you in here, and I'm not sure why it's replacing all of them. That message needs to be updated. Let's just get going in here. We'll let it do it. I'm just looking for my letterhead template. And actually I could search here instead of scrolling endlessly. We have so many template. So we have this shared letterhead, right? And for some reason, it's being a bit weird on me. Let's select all. Let's clear all, clear all, clear all, clear all. I was practicing. How can you tell? And now I've got to fix my problem. So say I made this letterhead template last year. I was a new customer last year, and it applies only to the T1 2024 module. And I want it to apply to more than one module. And it's really easy to come in here and make sure it applies to every T1 return, no matter what the module is. And this is the quickest way to kind of get the perfect letterhead for you. So I could apply it to all T1 modules. And what's different this year is that we now have a little piece of metadata that doesn't specify the year at all. That little asterisk here on the left-hand side is now a wildcard. So next year, this custom, we won't have to come in here and fix this. I hope. I think, most likely. Providing it's got that little wildcard in the module setting of properties, then it's going to apply to all years of T1. So if you've been with us for a while and you come in here every year and you make it apply to the next one, you don't have to do that anymore. That is a change. I can actually make this apply to all years and all modules, which is handy because we did do some work over the last few years to make sure that your information as a preparer that's on the engagement worksheet is consistent. The field codes are consistent. And so your letterhead should be good to go cross module. And you can see over here now I have wildcard entries for all the different years, and I have the bar across the top that's telling me what years and what modules this template applies to, which then means if I come in and I go to my letter, my client letter, no matter what year I get in the preview over here, I'm going to have that lovely looking letterhead that I made. I'm a very happy accountant today. All right, we're getting close. Just 2 more topics to cover. We got print and PDF, and then pricing. Now, again, if you've been with us before, you've probably been getting your way through these print and PDF options for a while. You do need to make sure you take a look every year. I think it's worth going in here because everybody does these things a little bit differently. And I'm going to give you the really quick, short version of looking at your print sets. So, and just before I do that, I actually want to be on the print PDF tab. And I can go in this way too. It's very similar. There's a few different ways to get into print options. There we go. All right, so what I want to point out here, it's a couple of things. We come with a lot of default print sets. You can see how many there are here, and I don't think I created some of these, I'm not sure. But I'm on the client copy right now, and the thing I want to point out is this little message down the bottom here. So if you've got a default print set like the client copy, and for some reason we've added a new form, and you've never added that form print set, you can take a quick look and see what forms are missing. So here there's a link that says show missing forms. It's telling me I don't have the Saskatchewan home renovation tax credit, which I probably didn't add last year, or because I'm not in Saskatchewan, didn't really worry about it. But I can quickly add it if I want over to here and bring it to my print set. And then that message will go away. Another way of dealing with this would be, and I'm going to just cancel out and come back in. Don't save. And then we're going to make those changes again. I got the message came back. Is this little asterisk here on the print set means that you've done something to this print set that is not the default. You can quickly revert, and then it will update nicely from the system the next time around. The other thing I want to point out in here is if you've got any custom print sets, one of the things that comes up a lot is how do I get something to show in the sidebar, the print sidebar on the left here? Or how do I get a form to show at the bottom or be checked by default? So this comes up a lot with the joint letters and the joint invoices. So I always like to point this out. So if you see our print set contains a joint letter and a joint invoice, and a client letter and a client invoice, that's all great. But the choice of whether they end up checked in the sidebar is controlled by 2 things. So let's just click on the client letter. I really want to remind you that there are right-click options for every form in a print set. And this is where you can choose what happens in the bottom. So in this case, it says when it is used, show it in a print set and select it for print. So the client letter is used. You can see it's got the little bars in it, and it's going to be in the print set, and it's checked. It's selected for print. You know, you have the option to always show it in the set, but not select it for print. And that's also an option. And that's the default for the joint letter. So you can play around with these and make them do automatically what you want to at the bottom here. The other game in here that is important to note is the relevant and true conditions. And these apply to the entire print set. So for example, the CRA condensed, it won't show in the sidebar here unless you need to paper file the return. So there's a condition already in here that says if it's ineligible for EFILE, the current client, then the print set will show in here. And then the condition 1 means that it would be checked in that circumstance. So there's a few different things to look at if you're doing some fun fun new print sets for yourself, because you can create as many print sets as you want. And this is the place to check your conditions. And then finally, for each print set, you can edit the default print configuration as well. Like, for example, I have my client copy and I have it set up for tax folder. You know, I can go in through and handle the file naming for those PDFs and what I want to do after I've generated it. And when you set all of this up, if you decide to do a batch print or something, although you don't generally batch print to tax folder, but if you decided to do batch something, you would have that all set up for your client manager as well. Something to note about print sets, which I know I showed you before, the right click applying items to other years, that does not work for print options. But you can still move a print set. You can copy them around to other years, just this little button on the set itself. Okay. Now we got one more, pricing. And I wanted to talk about pricing because there's a little known feature that was a customer request a few years ago that may or may not be useful to some of you. So pricing is yet another module option. And of course, we have full webinars and instructions on how to set up all your pricing. But if you choose to invoice by schedule or by, well, you can choose to invoice by schedule or by hour, but if you choose to invoice by schedule, there's some little hidden known settings at the bottom here, or items at the bottom, which can help you review your prices starting in the year. So first off, if you're going to use a single tax return or a flat rate, and you can see all those $0 price amounts in here, you can hide all the $0 items really quickly. The other one that's kind of fun is if you decide that, you know, every year you've got a price increase, there's a link at the bottom here that will increase your prices by 1% each time you click on it. So you can slowly increase your prices in here before you review them without much trouble, or decrease them as well. Easy peasy. The other thing you want to check, if you do need to have a discussion about this with anyone, you can export your price lists and, you know, talk about that with other people in your firm without having to all huddle around the computer if you need to. And then finally, the one that comes up for invoicing as well, this is a general option because it's not specific to the module. If you need to adjust your next invoice number, you go up to return preparation and look at invoicing. Your GST or PSD registration details would go in here. I haven't included them. You know, the provincial sales tax, if you can actually choose the based on taxpayers' residence if you happen to be in an area that you're near the border between two provinces. And you also have some options for invoicing that extend beyond just printing the invoice or emailing the invoice to your client. If you want to connect to Xero or QuickBooks to allow invoicing directly from there and tracking within your own QuickBooks or Xero setup, you can do that from here as well. Whew. So we've covered all of that very quickly and very quickly. And as I said at the beginning, this is meant to be a really quick overview of things that you can check before you get e-filing. And if you want to see a very similar list, you can find it on our news feed right now, 10 options to review before e-file opens. And it will cover most of what I've talked to you here and maybe even a little bit more. And then also remember that if you go to your resources section, you can visit our help center and you can type in here pretty much anything that you would like. So folder options, and you will find that help topic that will guide you through some of those items. Folders for client files, and we have extensive videos and webinars as well in our webinar recordings if you want to learn about things like printing or pricing and invoicing options. And that's it. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. So everybody have a good rest of your day and rest of your week.